Welcome, come back kids, to our second session of Thinking Maps Ambassadors for Writing. Today, we're going to do a quick review of last week before we jump into this week's assignment. Last week, we created circle maps based on the topics we chose for our essays. Remember that we are writing 5-paragraph essays, and we are working to incorporate evidence from the text that we're reading. So if we're enrolled in an English class, we're likely reading a novel, and I'm sure we're reading some of the stories from our English textbook as well. So we should have plenty of places to look for evidence to support our opinions and our decisions. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, last week, if you see up on the screen, we've got an example of what we saw last week. We were working on our circle map, and we started by choosing a topic, and then we kind of brainstormed a bunch of different ideas about our topic. We kind of summarized little stories about ourselves that went along with our topic, and some of us even remembered what books thought to think of, what books we've been reading that we might find quotes to help us in our writing with. And I walked you through last week how to include a citation for your text. You can see that we have that on the screen right here. It's very small, sorry guys. But we do have an in-text citation that just gives us an idea. When we're done, we'll be able to use that citation to tell our teacher, hey, look, this is where I got my information, so that we're not plagiarizing, because y'all are honest people and you would never do that, right? I didn't think so. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, last week we used our circle maps, and I reminded you to start thinking about the 3 main topics that you'll be able to expand on for your body paragraphs in your essay. So this week, we're going to take that and go a little bit further. This week, we are going to work on what we call a partial multi-flow map. This partial multi-flow map is going to help us really examine in depth those concepts that we thought might be good topics for each of our body paragraphs, and just add a little bit more depth and detail to it, because this is still pre-writing. We're still gathering our information and our sources and our ideas so that we can have a place to start in our writing, rather than just saying, there's a blank piece of paper in front of me and I'm supposed to be writing. I don't know what I'm writing about. So this thinking map, the partial multi-flow map, helps us really expand our thoughts about each of the topics that we're going to consider writing our body paragraphs about. So you can see on the example I have here for you, we start to the left with a square in which we write our topic. So I'm choosing my topic, same topic as last week, right? How people react to fear. Okay, so last week I talked about my 3 main ideas being fight, flight, and avoid. Oh, you know what I'm looking? That word avoid sounds weird because I've got fight and flight in here, and those are both nouns. So I need to change avoid so it kind of matches those better. What if I were to say avoidance? Yeah, that works better, huh? Okay, so I'm going to change that avoid to avoidance. I like that. All right. See, just talking to you is helping me think through my choice of words and make it better. Awesome. So now I've got fight, flight, and avoidance. I like that. That sounds better because they're all the same part of speech. So the words flow better. Awesome. I've got a good start. And now I need to add examples and details in each of my topics to help me kind of flesh this out so I have something to write about. All right. So I'm old-fashioned and I have a harder time sometimes typing and writing on the computer than just on a sheet of paper. So I chose to do my partial multi-flow map, sorry guys, on a sheet of good old-fashioned paper. Here you can see I've got mine started. I started by putting in the topic, and you can see I've got my topic right here, how people react to fear. Excellent. Okay, so there's my topic, and I've got my 3 paragraphs that I want to work on. So you can see here I've got fight, I've got flight, and I've got avoid. Okay, so those are my 3 topics that I'm working on. Oh, except what did I say before? Yeah, I'm going to change this avoid to avoidance because it fits the part of speech that I use for all of my other words. So I'm going to change that to avoidance. There we go. Oh, that's cool. I didn't know it would type the same color. Excellent. All right. So I've got avoidance down there. And now for each of my topics, I need to come up with at least 5 or 6 points because what's my base minimum for a paragraph when I'm writing in high school? Yeah, 5 to 6 sentences is a baseline, but really teachers are looking for 6 to 8. So if I can come up with 5 or 6 points, that gives me a good start on 5 or 6 sentences, and I'll only need to add a tiny bit more once I start writing. Yeah, right? Building this in. Okay, now ladies and gentlemen, before you get started on this, let me give you a quick heads up. This is not a 10-minute assignment. This paper you're seeing in front of you took me almost an hour to write. Yes, I know, it looks like nothing. It took almost an hour to write because when you are writing, the work is not in the words on the paper. The work is the things you're thinking, right? It takes a long time sometimes to develop a thought and then figure out how you want to put that into words. So please, ladies and gentlemen, give yourselves a lot of time to work on this. This particular exercise might take you an hour, just like it took me. You know, I've been writing longer than some of you have been alive. So if I took an hour to work on this, then you might want to consider giving yourself at least 30 to 40 minutes because it does take some time to develop your thoughts. All right, so let's take a quick look at the ideas I put down on my paper. Now you'll notice I've got these little hyphens here, these dashes. I did not write everything in full sentences. I've got little dashes to separate things, my ideas out, so I know what's what. You are more than welcome to do the same thing. All right. So I've taken some of the information that was on my circle map, but I've added to that information. So under fight, I talked about the amygdala because that's something I really want to make sure I bring up in my paper. So I put that down first. The amygdala is that part of our brain that regulates the fight-flight response. It has to do with self-preservation. So that's my next point. I want to make sure I mention self-preservation. Okay, and then I was thinking, you know, when I say fight, that doesn't mean like destroy your opponent, right? In my case, I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that I need to use only as much force as is necessary for that situation. So I put a quick note about that. And then I think I may have told you guys last week when I was going over my circle map, but when I think of a fight reaction to fear, I kind of think of a personal experience I had. So I just put a quick note on here. I want to tell the story of how I once was attacked, and rather than, you know, like killing my opponent or permanently maiming him, I pinned him down, calmed him down, and gave him an opportunity to leave unharmed. So I wanted to make sure that I used only the force that was necessary. So that would be an example of a story I could tell in my writing. Now, obviously, that's going to be several paragraphs, right? Or several sentences, sorry, within this paragraph, or it might be a little subsection of my writing. That's okay. So on my map here, I've just written a sentence or so that I will remember what I want to discuss. And I've given myself notes. So you can see here, I put story of how I pinned my attacker and allowed him to leave. And then that will give me a starting point when I want to write. But just so that I remember, oh yeah, that's the story I wanted to tell. I don't have to write it all out on this map. I just need to give myself a launching point. Okay. And then what I chose to do for each of my topics, I came up with the last point on each one is kind of a summary of what that paragraph is about, because later I know I'm going to have to write an introductory sentence for my paragraph where I tell the reader, hey, this is what I'm talking about. But I don't want to say, now I'm going to talk to you about fighting as a reaction to fear, because that's stinking boring. And that's what I've been doing since like kindergarten, first grade. So I wanted to just come up with a topic, and then in my sentence I can mention that topic. So I put rise to the challenge. You may have heard that expression before. So sometimes when we react to fear, we choose to rise to that challenge and overcome. So I just put rise to the challenge because it helps me think of that little phrase, and I can use that when I'm starting my paragraph. Yeah. All right. So I've got a beginning of my first paragraph, and then my second paragraph, it did kind of the same thing. We're talking about flight in this paragraph. So I wanted to make sure I mentioned safety and self-preservation. Kind of ties back in with that first paragraph, right? We're mentioning this. It's okay to mention something more than once because we're talking about related topics. Awesome. Okay. So sometimes, it's hard to read my own handwriting today. Wow. Sometimes flight might be the wisest action. And I know I should have put a note in here. What I meant was that like say you are say you're outnumbered. Sometimes maybe it's better to get yourself out of a situation if you know you're hopelessly outnumbered. Like sometimes say a military action is taking place and one's army doesn't have anywhere near enough people, and they might choose to withdraw and come back with reinforcements, right? So maybe that would be an example when flight would be a fear response that might happen. And that would explain how sometimes perhaps the wisest course of action might be flight, is if you were outnumbered. So I've just got that quick note down there. Notice that I said a lot of words to you guys, but on my paper I have the words sometimes wisest action and outnumbered. I'm just quickly jotting down notes to help me remember the things I'm thinking of so that later I'll be ready to write out these paragraphs. And please, don't be upset if it takes you a long time to think out what you want to say or to come up with enough information to put in your paragraph. That's totally okay. Writing is about thinking. It's about conveying your ideas to another person. And so this is really a difficult process, and it takes a lot of time. So it is okay if you need time to work on this. Please take your time. All right. So I can see going on in I put a note here about many young children or young people. So a lot of times when a kid is scared, flight will be their first response. So I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that. And so this was my note to myself to help me remember that. All right. And then, below that I put sometimes first instinct when overwhelmed or lacking coping skills. So that's a note to myself about something I might be able to include in my paragraph, is that, flight is how we sometimes react when we don't have better ideas for how to respond. Like, I don't know what to do in this situation. I'm gonna get out of here. I'm noping, right? That's okay. So that would be something I might include in my paragraph. And then below here, I wanted to include either a story about someone I know or myself in each of the paragraphs, because it helps make it more personal for the reader, and it also makes it more interesting for the writer. So I put a note about, for myself, jumping off furniture to avoid the evil cannibal clown as a kid, because I had this ridiculous idea as a kid that this evil clown lived under all the furniture and he would eat me if he could get a hold of me. So every time I got off, I was getting up from a chair or the table, I would always leap out of the chair to avoid this clown, because I was convinced I could jump far enough that he couldn't reach me. So that was an example of trying to get away from the situation instead of fighting, right? And so that's an example. And then I wanted to come up with a quick phrase for each of my topics that kind of summed up what I was talking about. So on here, I've got cowardice or wisdom. Some of you may not know what cowardice is, but cowardice is, you may have heard the word coward, when someone doesn't stand up and lets people walk all over them or runs away. We call them a coward. So because I'm talking about flight and running away from something you're afraid of, being a coward might be one way someone would refer to that. So I just changed the word coward to cowardice. And I want to talk about cowardice or wisdom, because I talked in here about sometimes maybe running away might be the wisest action if you're outnumbered. And so then I put it in parentheses because I thought, well, cowardice or wisdom, I might not remember what the heck I was talking about with that. So just to help myself remember, I put in parentheses, live to fight another day. Right, so we might choose what other people would see as cowardice, like say you're a military unit that's outnumbered and you withdraw. Maybe that would be cowardice, but at the same time, it gives you an opportunity to live and come back later with reinforcements. So that's kind of what I put down for flight. And you can see I've done the same thing with my last topic, avoidance. I put that probably the most common response, it's related to flight, but a little bit less dramatic. Choosing, oh yeah, so this is my example from my own life here. I put choosing not to skydive when afraid of heights. Yeah, I have this deathly fear of heights, and I'm just, for myself, I really want to skydive, but I think it would be stupid because I probably give myself an anxiety heart attack on the way down. So that one I might avoid, right? All right. Another one I could use about me not checking to see my credit card balance, because when I'm apprehensive, I'm fearful that I've spent more than I can afford. Sometimes I avoid that situation by not checking on it. So often that's a very temporary solution, which I put down here. And then another example I put would be choosing not to pay taxes. You have to pay them eventually. So yeah, you can choose not to do it right now, but it's going to catch up to you. It's going to bite you later, right? And so then for my summary, I decided to put like my 1 or 2 word phrase. I put postponing the inevitable or creating thinking time. So you may have heard the expression postponing the inevitable. It just means to put something off when you know it's going to happen. No matter what you do, it's still going to happen, but you try to delay it as long as you can. And then I wanted to contrast that with the idea of creating thinking time, because perhaps you need time to create a strategy for how to better respond to the situation, and that might be a reason why you would avoid a situation. So this gives you guys an idea of how you can create your partial multi-flow to help you really develop your thoughts on each of your topics that you're going to be writing about. So on my map, you might be able to see this, but I've got 5 to 6 points for each topic. You need a minimum of 5 or 6 points for each topic so that when you sit down to write, you have enough to develop a thorough paragraph. And please remember that these maps are meant to be notes, so you don't have to write every word. It doesn't have to be spelled perfectly. You don't need sentences. What you need are quick phrases that will help you when you sit down to write as a launching point. So you know, oh yeah, I wanted to tell this story. Okay, yeah, I got it. So that's what this is all about. All right. I know I do have 1 or 2 people signed in. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to either unmute yourself and ask now, or you can type into the chat if you prefer to do it that way. That would be fine as well. All right. So if I have no questions, I'm going to give you a chance to work now on developing your partial multi-flow map. I will leave our meeting running and I will be checking in. So if you have questions as you're working, I want you to unmute yourself and speak or type into the chat so that I know you need my help. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing what you write.